This report presents a comprehensive statistical analysis of residential property sales data in Melbourne, based of 20,790 listings sampled into 200 recorded between January 2022 and March 2024. The purpose of this analysis is to extract the meaningful insights from the data set to inform strategic business decisions in the real estate sector. The data collected above from analysing 200 sales indicates that houses are the most commonly sold in Melbourne, comprising of 77.5% of the total sales. Townhouses are the least frequently sold, with only 6% of the total sales. This suggests a lesser demand for the type of property. The overwhelming preference for houses could signify a trend towards larger living spaces, perhaps due to the changing demographic factors and lifestyle preferences. An analysis of the house prices reveals that many properties sold fall within the mid-range bracket. Out of the 200 data selected, the highest frequency of sales at 40% occurred in the 1.27 million to the 2.27 million range, followed by 30.5% in the lowest range, $268,250 to 1.27 million. As property prices increase, the frequency of sales declines sharply, with only a small number of sales occurring over the 3.26 million mark. The distribution of sale price is positive skewed, with a longer tail on the high end. This suggests that while most homes are sold at a moderate price, a few high-value properties are sold at significantly higher price points, pulling the average up. The median is likely to be a way to represent the measure of central tendencies than using the mean. The distribution of property sales over years sampled of the 200 data collected, the highest value occurred in 2023, accounting for 119 transactions, 59.5%, displaying a peak in the market activity. In contrast to that, we see in 2022 a more ordinary 57 sales, 28.5%, then in 2024 we can only see 24 sales, 12%. Analysing the months, October 2023 was the most active, with 25 properties sold. Next in September of 2023 with 17 sales, and June the same year with 15 sales. This suggests a seasonal pattern, with the higher activity happening in spring to early summer. As the analysis can demonstrate that majority of the properties sold are located within the 7.6 kilometre to the 13.6 kilometre radius of Melbourne CBD. This range is accounted for 73 out of the 200 data samples, 36.5%, followed by 59 properties, 29.5%, situated within the 1.6 to 7.6 group. Together, these two inner and middle range zones make up 66% of all sales in the sample collected, indicating a strong connection of market activity in areas relatively close to the city centre. As the distance from the CBD increases, the frequency of property sales can be seen to decline rapidly. Only 13 of those properties between the 19.6 kilometre mark to the 25.6 kilometre, and only one property was sampled between the 43.6 and the 49.6 kilometre mark. This skewed distribution suggests that proximity to the CBD is a key factor when selling a property in Melbourne. The data on bedrooms can show that most properties were ones that contained 3 bedrooms. They accounted for 97 out of the 200 sampled at 48.5%. This can then be followed by 4-bedroom properties, 24%, and 2-bedroom properties at 17.5%. This suggests a strong market presence for moderately sized properties. Properties containing 5 or more bedrooms can be seen as less common, with only 11 properties with 5 and 3 with 6, thus indicating that larger homes may represent a niche in the market. At the other end of the scale, a total of bedrooms, 1-bedroom properties only account for 3% of sales. The distribution of bathrooms among the 200 sampled can show a clear trend towards properties with 1 or 2 bathrooms, which together make up 93.5% of sales. To break it down, that is 104 properties, 52% had one bathroom, and 83 properties, 41%, had two bathrooms. Larger properties with 3 or more bathrooms are significantly less common. Only 10 properties, 5%, contain 3 bathrooms, and just 3 properties, 1.5%, had 4 bathrooms. The limited presence of high bathrooms count can indicate that while there are a niche for larger properties, the broader market demand is clearly focused on more moderately sized properties. The distribution of available car spaces across the 200 highlights a strong presence of properties with 1 or 2 car spaces. 91 properties, 45.5%, offered 2 car spaces, with 67 properties, 33.5%, provided 1, making up nearly 80% of the total sample. This trend aligns with the typical need for medium-sized properties. 14 properties, 7%, had no dedicated car space. Properties with 3 or more were relatively rare, collectively making up only 19 sales, 9.5%. Notably, only 1 property recorded 5 car spaces and 2 properties offered 6. The analysis of regional sales shows that the majority of properties in the sample are concentrated within the Melbourne metropolitan zones, particularly in the northern metropolitan and the southern metropolitan regions. These 2 areas alone account for 118 of the 200 properties, 59%, with 64 sales in the northern and 54 in the southern. The western metropolitan region also shows a strong representation at 48 properties sold, reinforcing the dominance of Metro Melbourne in the market. In the contrast, outer regions such as Northern Victoria and Western Victoria recorded only 3 sales each. Sales in the Eastern Metropolitan, 18 properties, and the Southern Metropolitan, 10 properties areas were more modest but still demonstrating ongoing interest. When analysing the sale methods of the majority of properties sold were through sold at auction. 129 properties, 6.5%, were sold standard method of sale, making the dominant sale approach in the 200 sample. Then sold prior to auction accounted for 27 properties at 13.5%, thus indicating a considerable amount of properties were sold before reaching auction. The properties passed in sits at 22, 11%, whilst vendor bid and sold at auction make up for the smaller amount at 21 and 1. To estimate the average distance from the CBD for units only, a 95% confidence interval was calculated based on a sample of 33 observations. The sample had a mean of 8.31 and a standard error of 0.70. At the 95% confidence level, the margin of error is approximately 1.43. Therefore, the confidence interval for the true average price is 6.70 and 9.56. This means that we are 95% confident that the actual average price for properties in Eastern Metropolitan Region lies between the 6.70 and the 9.56. The average based on the 20,720 listings that was provided is 7.90, which lies between our sample data. To estimate the average property price in the Eastern Metropolitan Region, a 95% confidence interval was constructed based on a sample derived of 18 properties. The sample had a mean price of $2,069,965 with a standard error of approximately $251,328. Using a 95% confidence level, the margin of error is $530,255. As a result, we are 95% confident that the true average is $1,530,709.88 to $2,620,220.12. The figure of $2,099,545 from the 20,720 of properties lies between those two figures found. We conducted a null hypothesis, a HO, that the average price for SA sold after auction is more than the SP property sold prior to auction. The standard deviation is unknown due to not having sufficient data to analyze. Hypothesis 2. The results from the 2-sample t-test provided strong evidence that there is a statistically significant difference in average property prices between 3-bedroom and 4-bedroom properties. The mean price for a 3-bedroom property was approximately $1,869,639, whilst 4-bedroom properties had a higher average at $2,389,314. The test produced a t-statistic of negative 2.82 with 143 degrees of freedom with a two-tailed p-value of 0.0055. Since the p-value is well below the commonly used significant level of 0.05, we reject the null hypothesis, the HO, which assumed no difference in average prices between the two groups. These findings suggest that the number of bedrooms is a significant factor influencing property pricing, with 4-bedroom properties commanding a premium over 3-bedroom properties. The scatter plot illustrates the relationship between distance from the CBD and price. The regression line fitted to the data shows a clear downward trend suggesting a negative relationship. Price equals $2,420,126.33 minus $39,805.63 times distance. This model estimates that for each additional unit of distance, price decreases by around $395,805.63. Correlation coefficient equals negative 0.2581, indicates a weak negative linear correlation between distance and price. The coefficient of determination equals 0.0666, suggests that only about 6.66% of the variation in price is explained by distance. The null hypothesis we reject. This means there is a significant amount of evidence of linear relationship between distance and price, although the effort size is weak.